Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the Mount, a podcast from the campus of Mount Perrin Christian School. I'm your host, Steve Kyle. With me, as usual, the fantastic, the always
silly,
remarkable Viola Lucier.
man.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with something kind of better than remarkable. You know what I mean? But I don't mean better than remarkable that like you're better than remarkable is pretty good.
Yeah, it
but
is
just
pretty
a
good. I'll
different,
take that.
Yeah, a different word that wasn't remarkable because it just seems average, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. I think you deserve a
Well,
better
I
word
did
than
mess
remarkable.
up the Pledge of Allegiance today on the high school announcements.
Did you really?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
and I even read it.
Here's the great thing about that, because even in stuff like having to do with America,
Right.
there's grace and forgiveness.
There is.
Yeah, even for America. All right. Well, welcome to this episode. If you've, of course, read the title, you know what we're talking about. But you don't maybe know what these are. But this is the first one, depending on what order you might be listening to these. This is the first one of a 3-part kind of series built around something we do at Mount Perrin called our P.E.P Talks. They're under our Parent Ed program, which, Viola, you're a key part of our Parent Ed program. And within that is our P.E.P Talks. And it seems like a weird thing, but it's actually one of those like acrostics. Is that what they are? Acrostics? If you like, it stands for something else, because PEP actually stands for an acronym.
Okay. Yes.
Parents engaging purposefully is what it actually stands for. So this intentional, purposeful engagement. And this is the lower school episode. We do 3 of them: lower school, middle school, high school. This is going to be the lower school episode for our P.E.P Talks, and this is going to kind of be a very concentrated version of some of the content that's on there. And then we've got a guest. You've already heard her voice, and maybe people are like, do I know that voice? Maybe I've heard that voice before, but we are thrilled to have first time on the podcast.
First time.
Miss Caroline Bradford is here.
Yeah.
Caroline,
Yay.
welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome to have you. Caroline serves as our assistant athletic director. We have a massive athletic program. But that is not why you're here. We might bring you back because you're a great tennis coach and you do lots of awesome stuff. But that's actually not why we're having you as a guest today. Because probably most important to you is you are mom.
I am.
You are. You're mom. You're not just mom. You're mom to 2 elementary school boys.
I am.
Yeah. And what's that like?
Oh, wow.
She needs
yes.
a hug.
Well, first of all, welcome.
Yes.
Glad to
Thank
have
you. I'm
Yeah.
excited to be here. It's yes.
Good.
I'm mom to 2 boys. My house is a little wild. We have a lot of energy. We have again, I have a 1st grader and I have a 5th grader.
Yes.
10 and 7, and then we also threw in a boy golden doodle in there, the mix. So just
Yeah.
we have a lot of energy
You're
in my house.
outnumbered significantly at
yes,
your house, for
vastly
sure.
outnumbered.
Yeah. And there are, and of course, Viola and I know who obviously who your boys are. And,
Yes.
And I, of course, grew up in a house of boys.
Mhm.
And,
Really?
Yeah, brother. I mean, it was my cousins were only my one cousin Sonia was the only female cousin. All my other cousins were males, and so of course I have 2 daughters. Viola, you have 2 daughters.
do.
So we needed on this episode. I wanted a couple things. One, a parent of elementary school, preferably boys, who has even been to the P.E.P Talk. You actually checked all those boxes. You've been to the lower school P.E.P Talk.
Yep.
You are a mom of lower school, and you have not just 1 but 2 boys.
Yep.
And so you're going to be kind of that voice for us today
Okay.
to maybe ask those questions that are maybe that other parents listening might have. Both my girls are older. One's married, one's in college. Viola, you've got a middle schooler and a high schooler.
I'm in the trenches.
Yeah, you are. You're in the trenches. Now you're gonna be an expert on some of these future episodes as well,
yes.
because we've been there. But the first thing I want to start with, and of course these P.E.P Talks were created as a kind of a partnership, and a partnership with our home. Our mission statement talks about uniting with home, and so this is really this kind of, hey, how can we unite? How can we deepen that relationship and partner better together more than just parent sending? That's one of the main reasons why. And then, of course, this stems from parents navigating kind of uncharted waters with their kids.
Yep.
And this was sort of a resource to go, what should I expect? How can you help me? These are some of the questions parents have. And so I'm going to start with that for you, Caroline.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, so as a mom of boys, give me and listen, you and your husband, you guys are fantastic parents. I get to see firsthand a lot of
Thank you.
of
Yes.
you guys with that, but parenting is hard.
Yes,
Parenting is hard. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're listening, you know that it's hard. It's super difficult work.
Yep.
You as a mom now, I'm going to force you to think about this,
Okay.
because maybe you're the person who's like, I'm day to day and I don't worry about the future. But if you had to think about the future, what are some of the things that give you maybe the greatest bit of anxiety as it relates to being the mom of boys? You're in elementary school, you got a first grader and a fifth grader, one who's almost done, one who's getting ready to go into it. What are those kind of concerns, fears, questions? I don't know the best way to ask the question.
Yeah. So it's funny because I grew up with a sister. So I grew up in a household full of girls. So little boys is still a new world for me as well. But my husband grew up with a brother, and so he's like, no, this is just what boys are and what we do. But again, as we're parenting, and again, we're both working parents, so we're in the trenches of navigating just schedules and activities, and my boys are getting involved in the sports world, and we're doing the music lessons, and we're doing all the things. But the conversations in our house right now are really focused around, again, we're entering middle school. We're about to be in middle school, and that is a scary, scary world. But we have a saying in our family, God, family, friends. That's kind of what we always talk about with the boys, and just how to navigate that. But I would say one of those things that we're probably is looming on the horizon that is just so apparent is just the phone and the social media, and when to introduce that. And my son, that's a fifth grader, when can I get a phone? Mom, when can I get a phone? I'm like, why do you need a phone?
Yeah, where are you going?
Who are you going to hang out with that you need to have a phone with? And he's like, well, what if I'm at a friend's house? I'm like, go ask their mom to borrow their phone. Like, it's
right.
You don't you're not giving me a good enough reason as to why you need a phone. So again, I attended your pep talk last night, and we talked a little bit about just, again, there's not a right or wrong answer, but it's really about what your family works best for y'all. And we're kind of hard on that stance of you mentioned 14, and we're right there. We're not ready to budge on that just yet.
Yeah. So we've got cell phone or technology with that. So with two boys too, are there other, as they get older, you of course, and it happens late middle school, of course, on the horizon comes right now, boys are not interested in girls, girls are not interested in boys.
Yeah, they're
Do you think
smelly.
about that? Is that a thing like, hey, what's that going to look like for my boys? Is that going to be an easy, difficult, when the dances come up, and what kind of priority? Are there things that you and your husband think about at this point?
It is, and even just, the some friends that do have cell phones already, and just, I want to call this person. Well, okay, you just spent 8 hours with them at school, but okay, you can use my phone, and you can sit right here. I'm cooking dinner. Have at it. So I'm not saying you can't talk to your friends. Just we're just controlling it a little bit more, and just again interestingly, what you talked about last night, just the opportunity of when you hand them the phone, like you're just handing them the world, and just right there, that was
so true.
It really, something that stuck with me from the pep talk is that is everything in life, good, bad, and indifferent. So that'll be a challenge. Again, we're not quite at that stage yet of life, but it's on the horizon for sure.
Yeah.
But
right. So I'm going to pose this question here.
Yes.
I asked this question, I opened my session near the beginning and asked the question, how do you think we define parental success? How do we define? So when it's all done, like when it's finished, when our kids are, as I tell the group all the time, when you turn in your final project, like I did this summer with my oldest daughter, she got married, and I was like, that's it, my final project, here it is. Gotta be a solid A. But how do you define, and I think it's an interesting question to ask elementary school parents about that. So how do you think, generally speaking, the world defines parental success? Do you think?
So I'm actually going to break that down into two things, because I think that people would say things like, oh, they're happy, that they, have a great significant other and a family, and that, they're off doing their own thing. That's what successful is. In reality, the flesh is like you went to a top tier school, you have X, Y, and Z, you have this car, you have 2.5 kids, picket fence house, like what are all those things that deep down flesh-wise people want? So I hear a lot of like, oh, I just want them to be happy. But then sometimes that contradicts like kind of what we're pushing our kids to do. But the real answer is, if my baby is in heaven with me, that is
Yeah.
that is the A.
Yeah.
For
You
sure.
know?
But we're in a culture,
Yeah.
obviously, Caroline, that success is what college
Paramount.
you went to.
Yep.
I'm a successful parent because my kid, they got into the right college. They're
Right.
they're comfortably living. Maybe they're not the wealthiest person in the neighborhood, but they're comfortable.
Right.
They're not wanting for anything. Would
Correct.
you think?
Agree. Yeah.
What?
I do, and I think that it's hard because we are also surrounded by a lot of beautiful things. We have a great campus.
Yeah.
We
Right.
have a lot of wonderful things that that we don't want to look down upon by any stretch. But
Sure.
it's also not why we're here,
Correct.
and so like the focus being on raising kids who follow Jesus is number one. I mean that's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's why my husband and I have chosen to invest in the school the way that we have, and that. Why we want to be a part of it, because the covenantal Christian school is the biggest. That's why we're here. That's
Yeah.
the bottom line.
Because I think that the answer to that question is it directly speaks to every decision that we make.
Mm-hmm.
So as a lower school parent, if I'm listening and I'm like, do I define that? Well, yeah, I would think well-rounded, happy, successful, great school,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Then every decision I'm going to make is going to lead to that definition
That's true.
of parental success.
Right.
And that's why it's really important to even ask that question and go, ooh, wait a minute, when I look back, is it going to be that? Because every decision I make is going to be like, yeah, we want that, but actually success would be this college, and that means you
Right.
can't go to church or necessarily
Correct.
do
Yeah.
these kinds of
Right.
things, because this is how we're defining success. So, and again, I'm not necessarily going to say this is what it necessarily is, but I do think that the way the world and our culture is defining success today would not be in alignment with, I think, of what God's word says.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping in mind, and Caroline, you make a great point with, we're blessed here, and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with being blessed.
Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, you're like, we got lots of stuff and we're not success. Absolutely not. Because you can be both.
Right.
Yep.
100%. It's just that big focus is going to be that perspective on that. And I do think that it's a really, really important time.
So not to reverse the question, but I actually feel like even as a parent, I don't parent with what I want the end to look like. It's almost sometimes I parent with fear of what I'm seeing, that I'm like, oh, I don't want to be like that, or, we don't want that to happen to us.
Yeah.
So you parent,
Yeah, it's reactive more than proactive.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's not a good place to be in either.
No, it isn't. Long term, it is not.
Mhm.
Now, again, there are going to be times we react as parents, but the biggest part of that is, if we're proactive, it significantly minimizes the reactive, because
Correct.
you've already thought and planned. And how many of us are so busy, it's literally get up and you're like, I find pants, find shirt.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, just to come
yes.
and do it. And with two,
Right.
a first
Yeah.
and a fifth grade boy, and it's a whirlwind, that's often the life of a lot of people who are listening right now.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So being that is proactive. So real quick, I'm going to ask this question. And so part of this pep talk discussion, a big part of it is, and I'm not going to get into this, we'll kind of skim through this, because we talk a lot about worldview, but I talk about the perspective of biblical worldview parenting, making sure we understand what a worldview is. We all have one, but specifically a biblical worldview, the framework by which we view and interpret our world through the lens of Scripture. Really important we do that. But I want to focus too, really quick, for those parents who are first-time elementary parents. They're kind of navigating. Maybe they're listening as a second or third grader and they don't know. What were some of the things that surprised you most about your kids? And Viola, you can think back a few years that surprised you that you weren't necessarily expecting. You've got a first and fifth grader, but as they were getting older, were there developmentally or some things you're like, okay, wasn't expecting that to go down that way? Is there anything that you can think of that or maybe a way that you parented that you recognize, okay, can't do that with boys?
Yeah. For anybody that knows my two boys, they're very different.
Yes.
And as they've gotten older, you can just see how different their personalities are. And we kind of joked when our oldest was a baby that he was very calm, very chill. Like, we were amazing parents. Like, I don't understand why this is hard.
High five each other.
Yeah, like, guys,
this
is awesome. And then my youngest one came, and he is wonderful in his own ways, but it's like, whoa, they're just different. And so the things that worked for Knox, my oldest, don't always work for Colt. They're motivated completely differently. They have, what really fires them up is just different. So it's a word you used last night was intentionality, and just, we've got to be very intentional with what we do with Knox because he's wired one way, and then with Colt, he's just wired differently. And and so, again, what works for one doesn't work for the other.
And you just make a great point, and by a lot, but our kids are different.
Yes.
It's really important if you're listening, if you've got lots of kids, and I know they're different, but we cannot get into the habit of doing just what's comfortable, easy, or worked on one and expect it to work on the others. It's really getting to know your kids, their motivations, their love language, their whatever. So
you
said this before on a podcast, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but you were like, as soon as you think your kid would never, what is it? Like they nevered before. Where it's just, I mean, that was the shocker for me, where I thought, oh, this will never happen. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness, this happened, and it's worse than I thought it was going to be. So now what? So don't ever be that parent that thinks, oh, we've got it. My kid's perfect. Because they ain't.
Yeah, they're not. And there are some things that I think as your kids are getting older and they're starting to reach, even in the 4th and 5th grade, develop a little bit of independence and shifting towards their friends and their acceptance in that group is when you start seeing things like lying, cheating, the things you thought your kids would never do, which, by the way, parents, is not the end of the world if your 4th or 5th grader has lied or cheated on something. Now, I'm not saying we celebrate it or reward it or... But those are kinds of things we have to consider developmentally as I know for me, that was like, I was, my kids grew up in a Christian home, like they just know you don't do these things. And when they did them, you're like,
well, now what?
I can't even, I don't even know what to do. Like, you should just know this isn't what you do. And your sister never did this.
Right.
But the reality is they're engaging and trying to find where they fit in their world. Girl, boy, tall, short, athlete, non-athlete, brand new student to the school. Like, where do I fit in this world? They're trying to navigate that, and it's really important that we recognize they're going, I'm I don't look, I don't act, I don't, how do I fit? And as parents, it's a difficult thing to sometimes navigate, because sometimes as parents, we want them to fit in a place that
they are
not interested.
Never fit into.
And they'll never fit in. And they shouldn't.
That's okay.
It is okay. Yes. But oftentimes we get parents, and I share this with a lot of parents, be careful on, encourage your kids to try new things.
Yes.
Even the stuff you love and want them to be, encourage them to do that. However, let them explore, discover, find their loves and passions and their things, and then encourage them in that way, and not get angry or disappointed when, you're not be the star quarterback if you play in the band.
Right.
Play in the band, though. Be the best, most amazing trombone player in the band. And let them do that. And I think it's important that we let them do that. What about schedules and habits for in lower school? When you think of that kind of thing, like, what is that? When I say that to you, for example, 2 boys, they're busy. You're busy because you're athletic director, assistant athletic director, with all the different stuff. Do you practice that? Is it something you wish you did more of? Have you guys sat down and began this process of, we need to start kind of developing family habits here, and what those will look like? What do you?
We do, and and kind of as the seasons go, the school seasons, fall, winter, spring, summer. It looks a little different, just depending on, again, my busy schedule or the boys' busy schedule or my husband, all the schedules. But we try to be very intentional about, again, our time together as a family, and dinners together at the table, and just having that time, even if it's 20 minutes with a box of pizza from Papa John's, like just something that we're together and having the time together. My boys play hockey, which is kind of different, but it does provide us some time, like when we're traveling to the rink or we're traveling to games, because there's not a lot of close hockey rinks around here. Right. But it gives us, again, in a way, intentional time, unexpectedly. but we're together, in a hotel room maybe, or we're together on a trip. But just the time together, again, is the four of us. But then we're blessed to have grandparents close by, and just the family time that we have with them that the boys love. And so, again, the schedule piece is just, my husband and I sometimes sitting down after the boys have gone to bed and going, okay, pull out your phone and let's talk about who's going to this practice and this practice. But then let's talk about when there's time for us, or there's time for, okay, why don't you go take Knox for just one-on-one, and y'all can have some time together with Dad to talk about the things that boys need to talk to their dad about.
Race cars.
Yeah. Or fishing, whatever it is. So it is all about just scheduling. I do love a good schedule. I'm a schedule person. So, but it's about filling the schedule with the right things, church and, again, family time, but then also fun, and just making sure that it's not always about school and always about this practice you have to go to, but like, what do you want to do? What do you like? My boys love to go fishing. So we try to make sure that we, let's go to the lake and just go sit outside and, the peace and quiet and fish. And again, as their passions change, realizing that it's okay for our schedules to change, or our, what our focus is, that we change.
Yeah.
And I think the ultimate fear of raising a quote unquote not successful child drives the schedule. So for example, I'm like, okay, I want my child to be involved in well-rounded, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to put them in sports and multiple sports. And then we've got to do cross-training for sports. And then we also have to do, learn Mandarin in our leftover time, and then play the flute with our toe. And when you start to just crave this, like, I want to create this perfect child that's going to, go on to be a successful adult, you do jam-pack your schedule with things that are not necessary.
Right.
So I do think you're right. It's important to really sit down and be like, what is the focus? Like, what do we as a family want to put our time and energy into?
Yeah. And it is. And the reality is, the habits and schedule you set now is often the one that you will continue to keep, because it's really hard to change it. When you sign your kids up for all the stuff that they love, and you're looking back going, how did I become really a glorified Uber driver?
Exactly.
Like, I'm doing this for free now. And that's it. And we've realized we've scheduled out family time. We've scheduled out church. We've scheduled out. And so
rest.
This is a perfect, rest
You
is
rest.
really, so this is a perfect time to go, all right, let's sit down, and figure out, what do we want the next, how are we going to define that success, and recognizing, and then how is that going to speak to the decisions that I make? So that's really good.
Yeah.
Something else really big to consider if you got a third, fourth, fifth grader and they're moving, especially if you have girls, you have boys. But we talk about two things that kind of go hand in hand. One, puberty is coming, and that's a game changer. Of course,
it's a vibe. Yeah, for
it
sure.
is. And if you have girls, it comes sooner, of course. But it's something to remember, because it changes a kind of a normalish child into something not so normal, something stable and controlled to something unstable and wild.
Right.
And then of course, if you have a daughter and a son, or you only have sons or daughter, girls mature way faster than boys.
Oh, yes.
And like I tell every group, boys never really mature. And it's going to be that way. But it's really important, because developmentally, your sons are going to maybe be smaller than the girls in class. And that's going to be hard for them. Yeah. But it's also hard. I had a daughter who is, now she's 5'11", but she was one of the tallest in her class, taller than all the boys when she was in elementary school. She was
That's
looking
my
down
child
on them.
now. Yeah.
And they get insecure about that.
Right.
They don't want to. I'm the giant. I'm the big. I'm the biggest kid in class. No girl wants to be the biggest kid in class.
Right.
And so, but it's important we understand that and help navigate them through that, because instead of going, why are they're acting. I've noticed that. That's when we can have these conversations, and we can remind our daughter, hey, be proud of who God made you. Stand up, shoulders back, like that. Don't worry about the boy. The boys might catch up. If not, they'll be little and you'll own them. Yeah. But it's remembering that instead of and again, I think that that's really, really important. And then of course I always say, and I have girls, so I recognize this. I don't know about boys, but they're sensitive to criticism. Even the most subtle bit of criticism, it will destroy them. And I think too much of that, and we can, and some parents can parent with criticism.
Right.
They focus more on the negative than they do the positive, and our kids need to catch them. They need us to catch them being good too. And so so criticism. I don't know about you. I'm guilty. I was guilty of that with my girls, and it was coaching, and I recognize that now. Do you see any of that in your boys at all? Like if there's even if they feel or sense you're being critical?
I do, and again, they're very different, but it's a sensitivity to criticism, but it's also just a sensitivity to having to act and behave a certain way, and just kind of even redirection or anything. It's just handling the emotions and just what do I sometimes they can have the big emotions and like how do I handle this? And some days they're great, and some days they're not, and it's sleep, it's food, it's all the other factors that factor into it. But it's definitely a hard road to navigate when you have to maybe come down on your child for something, or you have to get onto them because you also then don't want to crush their spirit, or you don't want to, to make them not want to do whatever sport or musical instrument or something like that, bad grade or whatever it might be. So
find balance between, because I grew up feeling criticized, right? So then now I'm that person where I'm like, oh my goodness, everything you do is amazing.
Yeah.
And then my husband's like, dude, they should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's do X, Y, and Z. So it's one of those things where you really do need to know who you are and what's important to you, because then that has to dictate how you're going to speak to your children. And
absolutely.
So then, great insight, ladies. So in the pep talks, and of course, we've kind of unpacked a little bit about what we can expect developmentally, some of the things we need to pay attention to, and then typically I'll go through and provide 6 key kind of biblical foundation words, and I'm going to go quickly through them for the sake of time.
Yes.
And highlighting, and I'll look maybe for a comment or just affirmation instead of being critical, ladies. Because still, I'm a 5th grader at heart.
Exactly. Aren't we all?
But these are 6 words, all of them rooted in Scripture that are there, and I think it's really important. Again, I tried. There are lots of ways we can approach this, but these 6 words, in one case maybe a phrase, I think it might be 2 words, is really about if we can remember these kinds of things and how they relate to us. And they're really super simple words, but I think it's really, really important. And of course, I open with the first one, which is love, which kind of seems obvious. And I would guess anybody listening, including you two here, you love your kids. And there's really nothing you could do, they could do, that you'd be like, no, my love's out. I'm done, tapped out. I loved you to death. Even if our kids just were like, I hate you and I never want to talk to you again, we're like, I still love you.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So love, when we think of love, it isn't so much to me about us loving our kids or who we love. I think as parents, we often forget what we love and what the message is about what we love. What are the things in your life, listener, that you love, that your kids can look at you in your life and say, not what you say you love, but where are you exhaustively spending your time, your resources, your and I think that's really important, because if they're shaping and raising kids, they're watching us.
Oh, yeah.
And they're seeing, what are you consumed with right now? And honestly, there are times I can look back and think there are things I'm not, maybe things I was consumed with, maybe more than I should have been in life. And so, again, like in your life, I'm sure there are things you love.
I would actually add on knowing how someone receives love.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like your love language.
Yes,
like how they
exactly.
best speak and receive that best. I do. I think that's a powerful when we think of love. And so, listener, or if you just think about that, think of not what you say you love to your kids, but what do you actually love, and what messages are those sending? Now, the things you love might be awesome and great, and it's not to say we can't love, and I use illustrations like college football but when it begins to impact the way that we live, or the way that and our kids are like, oh, so yeah, mom and dad say like God is important and we should love him, but boy, every Sunday, dad's playing golf and mom does blank. Now, there's nothing wrong with playing golf on Sunday, but when you just love it so much and I got to play it even more so than, we're not going to go to church as a family because we got travel this and we got to go here and we play golf and we do this. And we're like, you say love God, but we don't live like we love God.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important. Our kids know we love them, I think, and we got to show them that and understand their love language, but also evaluate our loves in life. And we can still, I can still like college football, but I don't need to break a TV or a remote.
Punt a remote.
I've never broken a TV or a remote. I didn't break the remote, but I did break a hang up. You know, there's like dry rack, those wooden things you fold out and you hang clothes over. We had one. I was watching a game in the room. We had some stuff hanging out. I got really mad. I had a dish remote for my thing. I threw it because I knew the clothes would stop the remote, but it snapped a wood dowel, right? The remote snapped the wood dowel and half the clothes just went to the ground. Well, I had to explain that to my wife.
Yeah. What happened was,
I got shoved down because there was a home invader and I needed a weapon.
A strong breeze.
Yeah. No, but and I use this as an example to say, but what if my kids were not there when I threw the anger remote in anger? But it's like one of those, like, man, Dad actually loves that so much that it's impacting him in really bad ways.
Yeah. Correct.
He seems angry. The next word we use is respect. And I think you were there last night when we talked about this idea of respect, essentially being not respecting just our kids or our spouse, but Scripture talks about this idea. Paul recognizes that it's basically putting others before ourselves. Do we model that with our kids? I don't know about you. I've been a selfish parent at times. Like I've literally made very wrong decisions in order for 10 minutes of peace. Or I've said some things where I wasn't putting the needs of my wife or my kids above my own because I was being super selfish. I don't know if am I the only parents who ever done that?
No.
I won't look for examples for you guys to give. We're not going to come clean on this episode, but respect is a big part of that. And how are we teaching respect on there?
And they see everything kids do.
They do.
So if you have some side conversation with someone else about how you don't want to do this and how Susie does this and blah, 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 they're hearing it all. And then
even in the other room.
Correct. And then people are shocked when their kid comes to school saying and acting the same way.
Yeah,
so,
it's a good point.
Yeah,
it's a great
have
point.
to model it.
The third one is the one you had referenced earlier about intentionality.
Yes.
Yeah, and about being intentional in what we do.
Yes.
And you said that was obviously something important for you guys.
It is, yes. Just the conversations we have, the topics we talk about, the movies, videos, the things that are, we watch in the house. We do try to be intentional with that. Just again, what's appropriate even for the fifth grader isn't always appropriate for the first grader, and just trying to. But again, navigating those waters is always a challenge as well.
Is being intentional easy?
No.
It's hard.
Yes.
It's hard. Being passive is easy.
Correct.
Throwing them an iPad and saying, find something is easy.
Oh,
Being intentional of what will I do when my child, or taking the time to possibly being intentional, hard work. It is not, but it's work we're called to. It's expected.
Well, and I also think too that the state of where we're in, we feel as parents that we have to constantly entertain our children. I mean, we all grew up being schlepped around,
or like
doing
go outside
everything
for the next 4 hours. And,
so you can be intentional in different ways. It doesn't have to be completely one-on-one. You guys are doing flashcards of like the whole entire family and what they like. It's just, do something.
Great point. Great point. Boundaries and limits with elementary kids. I think it goes without saying. But we're in a world now where boundaries and limits are not popular with even little kids now. They're like, Mommy, I need all the freedom in the world. Even so much. I just saw a news story, 8-year-old, mom's credit card, drove to Target.
She needed that Frappuccino.
You talk about no boundaries or limits. Mom's like, here's the grocery, here's the car. Go get Mommy some Target. I think it's funny she went to Target. I do. I'm thankful no one got injured.
How did she know how to get there? I have a driver in my house who doesn't even know how to get out of the neighborhood.
8-year-old drove to Target, bought herself a Frappuccino, and was walking around Target when the police officers caught up with her.
How tall was she?
I don't know. She must be a tall. I didn't see her. I saw the video of her driving down the road because a guy behind her with a camera. But anyway, we're talking about boundaries and limits, and that is not them.
No.
That is not
insane.
them. But and I doubt the woman whose child it was is listening to the podcast, but we know you didn't give her the keys.
Yes,
You
exactly.
were probably sleeping. Yeah. But anyway, boundaries and limits are important. And not only do kids need them, they want them.
They do.
They actually do.
Very good point.
Kids want boundaries. We need to give them boundaries. They're designed for that. If you're a parent who doesn't have boundaries and limits for your kids, you're not parenting right. I'm just going to tell you that. Now, I'm not saying everybody's has to be the same.
No.
You make a great point. You said, I get a 5th grader and a 1st grader.
Yeah.
The boundaries can look a little bit different.
And even what I think when my 1st grader gets to 5th grade, they might even look different only because they're just different kids. And again, from a motivation standpoint, just from what they're capable of, maturity wise, and that's hard because then the rational piece that I know neither one of my children fully have developed yet, they don't understand. Well, why does he get to do it? Well, why does this one get to do it? Why that? Why do I have to do it this way? And so it's then the reasoning and all those things go out the window.
And the easy way out is just say, you're right. And just let them
do it. Yes.
Yeah. Instead of going, no, this is how it's going to be. And I'm going to stick to it. And it's important we do that because once we start buckling under that, you might as well just throw it out. Your kid's driving to Target.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're just going to Target.
Yeah.
And then the last kind of to the grace and forgiveness piece, which I think is really important. It's important to remember, first of all, for mom and dad, for you to hear this, godly parenting is not perfect parenting.
No, not at all.
Godly children are not perfect children. So that's key. This podcast is not about doing everything right and your kids are going to be great. They're not.
Right.
Great kids from great homes make big mistakes sometimes.
Yes.
Awesome parents make big mistakes sometimes. That's why grace and forgiveness has to be something that defines really this whole parenting thing, in that they see it modeled.
Amen. Yeah.
That they see us sometimes even saying we're sorry for the things we've done.
Yes.
Because they have to recognize mom and dad aren't perfect, and they've modeled for me what you do when you're not perfect.
Right.
And oftentimes when you have kids who can't apologize, I bet usually it's because they have parents
who can't,
who don't apologize. They don't. They've never seen it, and they're like, I can't believe they wouldn't say they're sorry. More than likely, they watched model conflict and all that kind of stuff where no one ever admitted wrongdoing or apologized.
Took responsibility.
And hear me, I'm not saying that's always the case, but it can be often the case.
Absolutely.
And so then as we kind of wrap up, well, how do we do this though? If we want our homes and our children, our parenting to be this love and this grace and forgiveness done with intentionality and include all of these kinds of things, there's a couple key things we have down here listed in that we talk about. And the first one's to pray. I mean,
absolutely.
Again, I know it seems like such the cliche. Have you prayed about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People will
you could
say
pray
that.
it away.
Yeah. But the reality is, I in my own life, this is the case. If I truly believe prayer works, why don't I do it all the time about everything? And if God is the creator of my children and has their best interest in mind, why would I not seek him every single day for their best interest in my parenting of them? But I always tell parents, don't just pray for them, pray with them. And keep praying with them. Pray with them, pray with them, pray with them. And sometimes people are like, well, my spouse doesn't like. You pray with whoever will pray with you in the house, but we have to be doing that. Stay engaged and initiate conversation. Yeah. Do you guys have Viola? Your girls, have they always been chatty and tell you all about their day without asking?
Katie Lucier will. She tells me everything always, but Claire's a little harder. She's a tough nut to crack. But a lot of it is when you get into the car, don't start the Spanish Inquisition. Yeah, it is just tell me something cool that happened today, or what did you eat for lunch? They really like to talk about that. Yeah. But the more that you don't react, and you could be freaking out on the inside, but if you don't react, then they're going to tell you when things are really wrong.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, reacting with anger, shock, like disgust, those kinds of reactions. It's not to say there aren't going to be certain but once you do that, they begin to shut down. Right. Then you lose them. Then they don't want, they're like, I can't talk to mom about that.
Exactly.
She just rages on me.
Exactly.
And you got to be careful. And our natural, response is that. That's why if we're spirit-led parenting, and it's not always easy to do that, And so, it's finding the right things to say. I don't know if your boys, if they're
less chatty in the car. Again, sometimes you can get the right question or just the right thing will pop up. But a lot of times it's just sitting on the couch. Hey, they'll ask a question. My boys are very inquisitive. And so they'll always ask a question. Sometimes I have to not be thrown off by the question. I kind of, again, have to take a deep breath myself and be like, oh my gosh, why? Yes. Like, what are you talking about? And so, but again, I try not to get in the car and go, okay, how was school? What'd you do? Who did you talk to? How was your friend?
Mean to you? Yeah.
Right. Like, because then it almost prompts I don't know, was somebody mean to me? Maybe I need to figure something out. Maybe I need to make something up in my head. And so it's just the creating opportunities either at the dinner table or, on the way to a practice where we can just start a conversation and then maybe it comes up about, oh, well, I have a question about this, or why did one of my friends say this on the playground? What does this mean? And so then we can kind of dive deeper. But our big thing is making sure they don't ever feel like they can't ask us anything. We want them to always feel that no matter the question, just come to mom and dad and we'll talk about it.
Parental Google.
Yes, over the real Google.
We'll be that.
Your Ask Jeeves.
Yeah. Bring Ask Jeeves.
I forgot about
That's
that.
old.
It is. But the key is just making sure we as parents are initiating conversation.
Yes.
If we don't have kids, we've got to keep the conversation going about all the stuff.
Yep.
The older they get, the more,
kids.
the more
Pursue
important those conversations. So we've got to get to this before we wrap up this podcast, and it's the big one. To me, it's the single most important decision, I think, today in parenting. All wraps around this idea of a cell phone, a smartphone. I do. I think it's arguably one of the most significant things. Is not really even a question of if, because every parent, I don't see a single, maybe American parent that doesn't have the means by which to give their child a phone, gives them a phone. The number's crazy. By the time they get to a certain age, it's like 98% of students over like the age of 12 or 13 have a smartphone.
Yeah.
So when you think of that, that's crazy. So this really isn't so much about a question of if, it's when.
Correct.
And I think it's the biggest decision to make. You say it's one that you guys are thinking about, and your boys are already talking about.
A couple of we know some friends who have it. They have, and for whatever reason, and every family is different for why. And so again, obviously as they get older, when they're 15, 16, and you talk about being in a car, I mean, that's a very valid reason to
100%.
me of hey, you're not always going to be with me. You might be by yourself. But we're luckily not there in our stage of life yet. But again, the desire is still there, and just, well, so-and-so has one, and what about this? And I want to play this game. And it's okay, Mom, I won't do the bad things. Well, it's not about you. It's about what it can do, and just the lack of control that we feel like we would have as parents. And not that we're trying to be overly controlling, but we're protecting them because we only have so long to do that at some point. I mean,
and contrary to what the world is teaching, kids are not ready to make those decisions.
Correct. No.
The world's like, hey, they're speaking, so they should be able to make significant life decisions.
Right.
And if they want a cell phone at 7 and they feel and they can ask that and you should give them one. And you make a great point. We are not going to say we're not here to say, hey, here, if you're a Christian and you love Jesus, here's the approved age. Right. And if you don't, do you even read know your Bible?
Right.
Of course, this is not about, if you're listening right now, you have a 4th or 5th grader and you gave your child a phone. Yeah. This is not a reflection of your spiritual, whether you love Jesus or not. Right. There is no command in the Bible that says thou shalt not give your phone before 14. There is a lot of data and things that support the later the better.
Absolutely.
It's out there.
It's
out there that we should just, if you can wait, and base it on need, not want. And my friends all have one. It's not a need.
Yes.
That's a want. And are we doing that with our kids in that? So it's something you should pray about, something you should, and then whatever you decide, and hopefully it's to maybe wait as long as you can, and then eventually give it to them, knowing the risks that are with that, and then of course know everything about it.
Yeah.
Know what apps are on it.
Yep.
Manage screen time.
Yes.
All the
boundaries,
stuff.
Everything. Yeah.
All of it. Knowing what they're at, put every tracking app possible on there. Yeah. And make it, CIA that thing.
Yes.
Into doing that. And so, and then of course, I think as we're finishing up, making and sitting down and starting to plan out those really important decisions, like not just a cell phone, but social media, dating.
Yeah.
Those are things as a husband and wife, as moms and dads, we should be talking about because it's coming really soon.
It is.
So as a family, we should be thinking about, praying about, what are we going to do when they come home one day and say, this was my boyfriend or girlfriend.
Right.
We've already crossed that bridge. We know where we're going to be.
Yes.
Lower school is a great time to start having those kind of family conversations, even if it's just mom and dad having the conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're listening, go, ooh, we haven't really found out, do we even agree on whether our kids should be dating or not?
Yeah.
Sometimes parents don't.
Yes.
They don't agree. And you wanna make sure that they do. All right, before I always remind our people at the end that, listen, we can worry about our kids and we can try to focus on defining what parental success looks like. Scripture makes it clear that our priority is to seek God's will. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Jesus said that. And that is one of those, hey, listen, if you want your kids to be where they're supposed to be, doing what they're supposed to be doing in the center of God's will, then it's seeking his word and his truth. The creator and author and maker of our kids is the one who knows and has mapped it out.
Right.
Successful kids are about, I mean, like you said, love. I mean, I said, if my girls love Jesus most, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Right.
If they love Jesus
Absolutely.
most,
The rest will come.
It sounds
Yeah.
really simple,
Yeah.
but if they do that, then that means I actually believe God has a plan for them. And if that's a plan of a successful college and tons of money, cool, great retirement for dad, but it might not be.
Right.
And I'm cool with that, because in the end, do you love Jesus? Yes. And I'm going to be like, Dad's happy because I know you're in the center of the will of the one who made you, the one who loved you before I ever did.
Yes.
And so any closing words from either one of you before we wrap up our extra long episode of From the Mount?
The only thing I would say is this is hard, and it's okay to seek community.
Yeah.
It is.
Seek community.
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
Too, as well. As
Ask
a Christian
questions.
school, you should
Yeah.
be plugged into a church. Your community should be church people. And then reach out, because parenting is one of the most difficult things you will ever do, but one of the most rewarding, joyful,
Yes.
amazing things you'll ever do. And so, well, ladies, again, thank you. Caroline,
Thank you.
great to have you on this
I
episode
appreciate y'all inviting me.
of From the Mount.
Absolutely.
And thank you for listening to another episode. If you have any questions, show ideas, you can email us at fromthemount@mtparentschool.com, fromthemount@mtparentschool.com. Thank you for listening to another episode of From the Mount.